Humanity has always been seen as weak, its borders fragile, its strength an illusion. The Setkar Dominion thought it was right. Keep your focus, we're not done yet. The command echoed across the trembling comms network, crackling in the air as the space around them distorted with the force of the incoming assault. For a moment there was silence, but then boom, everything exploded. The words were no longer just a rallying cry. They were a death sentence. The voice of Admiral Garrick Voss, the man whose hand had held the fate of Earth's outer colonies, now lost in a burst of blazing light, left only ruins behind in the distant edges of space. The Setkar had come. The enemy, in their arrogance, had underestimated humanity. The fiery remnants of the Solarian colony flickered on the laser plasma displays. The flames of destruction danced in brilliant arcs across the screen, while debris chunks of once thriving cities and research labs drifted into nothingness. The visual feedback from the heads-up displays painted a terrifying picture of the aftermath. What was once a jewel in humanity's expanded empire was now a broken shell, shattered beyond recognition. Silence settled in the command center of Earth's defense fleet, as the scale of devastation became all too real. Not even the deep hum of engines could mask the weight of the moment. Admiral Voss, standing at the center of the command bridge, clenched his fists, staring at the wreckage through cold, bloodshot eyes. His breath came in ragged bursts, but his expression remained impassive. The attack had been swift, unpredictable, and ruthlessly executed. But beneath the shock, beneath the grief that curled like smoke in his chest, there was something else. Voss's resolve hardened. This was only the beginning of what was to come. "Admiral, the Solarian fleet, it's gone," Commander Enric Kiros said, his voice low, filled with disbelief. He stood stiffly beside Voss, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. His face was pale, almost ghostly, as the sheer scale of the loss gripped him. "I see that, Kiros," Voss responded, his voice a low growl that carried the weight of someone who had witnessed too much loss. "The Setkar thought we were helpless. They thought they could wipe us out without so much as a second thought." He stepped forward, his boots clicking sharply against the metal floor, and leaned in close to the central display. The laser plasma flickered briefly, as if even the technology itself was uncertain, reflecting the chaos that had just unfolded. The once proud Solarian colony, where humans had built schools, hospitals, and thriving civilian structures, was now reduced to smoldering ruins. "They're making a mistake," Voss muttered under his breath, almost as though speaking to himself. His eyes burned with cold fury, his mind racing through every painful memory of the attack. His family, the last remnants of his personal world, were still out there, drifting in space somewhere. No remains had been found. He had seen the life go out of their eyes before he was forced to watch it all burn, but the fire inside him had only grown. "What's the plan, Admiral?" Kiros asked, his voice tinged with a note of fear, uncertainty creeping in despite his years of military service. "The plan is simple," Voss replied, his voice steady. "We fight back. We will show them that they were wrong to think they could simply crush us like insects." There was no hesitation in his words. His strategy had been laid long before the Setkar made their fatal error. The humans were going to play the long game. They would pretend to submit, as their enemies expected, while in the shadows they would gather the strength needed to make the Setkar regret their actions. Voss turned to the tactical officer, Lieutenant Raymond Cirque, who had been silently tracking the movements of the alien fleet. Cirque's face was drawn, his normally calm demeanor shattered by the horrors of the day. He worked the holographic interface with deft fingers, calling up star charts, fleet compositions, and military intelligence. "Where are they, Lieutenant?" Voss's voice broke through the tension. "The Setkar fleet. They're moving towards Lysar next. Our military defenses on the outer ring are overwhelmed. If they strike there," Cirque paused, taking a breath before continuing, "Lysar won't survive. No one will." Voss nodded once. He'd already anticipated the attack pattern. He already knew what the Setkar thought. They were too confident, too sure of their overwhelming superiority. They believed the humans would break under their assault, but they were wrong. The Setkar had underestimated the one thing they couldn't account for: humanity's resolve when pushed to the edge. "The message is simple," Voss said, turning sharply to face his team. "We will give them no satisfaction. They will think we've broken, but we'll bide our time. Let them think they have won, and when the time comes, we'll make them regret it." "How?" Kiros asked, his voice just above a whisper. The question hung in the air like a dying ember, yet in it was the true challenge they all faced. Voss stepped closer, his presence a heavy weight that pressed into the hearts of all who stood in that room. His eyes narrowed as he looked up at the burning image of the Solarian system. The once vibrant cluster of human civilization was now nothing but ashes. The fire that burned in his chest burned for them, for all of them. "We rebuild," Voss replied, his voice low but forceful. "We take everything they've left us with, and turn it into something they can't possibly imagine. We reverse engineer every last piece of their technology, and we build a fleet they'll never see coming." Kairos and the others remained silent for a moment, the sheer weight of Voss's words sinking in. They weren't just talking about fighting, they were talking about turning the tide in their favor. They would give the Zikar a fight they could never imagine. The humans had survived much worse, and they would not be the first species to fall before the might of an empire that was too arrogant to see its own flaws. Voss turned back to the display, staring at the remnants of the once glorious Solarian colony. It had been a cradle of humanity's hope in the stars, but now it was just another warning to the Zikar, a warning they would never forget. "We make them pay for what they've done," Voss said, his voice cutting through the stillness. "And we'll start by showing them that they were wrong to think we would cower." As the silence enveloped the command center, the hum of systems came to life once more, a subtle reminder that the war had only just begun. The silence in the command room was suffocating. As the image of the destroyed Solarian colony still lingered on the laser plasma display, Voss leaned against the cold steel table, his knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. The destruction was catastrophic, but it was far from the end. He had promised that much. He could feel the eyes of his team on him, waiting for something, a sign that they weren't broken. They weren't. "We have a chance to make them pay," Voss said, his voice low, almost a growl. The words felt like gravel in his throat. He met Kairos's gaze, the weight of the last few days lingering between them like the dust after a storm. "But we need their technology." Kairos didn't blink. "Then let's go to work, sir." The plan was already in motion. Voss had initiated Operation Ironclad the moment the last of the defensive shields fell on Solarian. It was covert, silent, but it was happening. Across the solar system, in the hidden depths of asteroid belts and forgotten moons, teams of engineers and military experts were already dismantling the wreckage left by the Zikar, scavenging for answers, for hope. In a facility beneath the surface of Mars, Dr. Darian Volke paced in front of a massive array of dissected Zikar wreckage, his eyes scanning the pieces like a puzzle. Volke was brilliant, sharp in a way that made others feel the chill of his intellect, but even he couldn't mask his frustration. He turned towards Voss, who had just arrived, his boots clicking against the steel floors. Volke's voice was tight with exhaustion, but there was a gleam in his eyes, the kind that only came when he was close to cracking something wide open. "It's their propulsion systems," Volke muttered, half to himself. He gestured toward the mangled remnants of an alien warship. "I think we've got it. I think we understand it." Voss walked forward, his gaze fixed on the mangled pieces before him, the jagged metal and twisted wiring. The smell of burnt circuits still clung to the air, sharp like old memories. He nodded slowly. "Explain." Volke moved to a nearby console, his fingers quick against the panel. Data poured onto the heads-up display in rapid bursts, lines of code and equations flashing too fast for most to follow. But Voss had a sharp mind. He studied the patterns, his pulse quickening as the pieces began to fit together. "This," Volke pointed, "is where they've been hiding their secret. Their propulsion system runs on quantum displacement, not just propulsion. It's a method of bending space-time, of folding the fabric of space itself. They've used it to jump vast distances in an instant. No conventional ship can keep up. It's beyond anything we've ever seen." Voss's eyes hardened. "And we can use it." Volke met his gaze. "I think so. The theory is sound. With enough time, we can reverse engineer it. We need to understand their quantum grid technology, how it alters gravitational fields. But once we have that," he trailed off, as though realizing the enormity of what he was saying. Commander Helix Dvorak, who had been silently observing from the back of the room, crossed his arms. "How long?" His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his impatience. They all wanted an answer. Volke didn't hesitate. 3 months, if we're lucky. But it's not just propulsion. Their weapons systems, they're powered by something else entirely. We need to tear those apart too. Gravitational shielding, particle manipulation. They've made a mistake by leaving us this much to work with. Voss's lips curled into a thin smile. Good, get to work. The next several weeks were a blur of motion. In the outer asteroid belt, hidden deep within craters and behind debris fields, massive shipyards were constructed under layers of secrecy. The teams worked tirelessly, repurposing what they could from the wreckage of the Zikar fleet. Shuttles were brought in, transporting vast amounts of raw material. Every section of each ship was carefully crafted with a singular goal in mind: to exploit the weaknesses they had discovered in the Zikar systems. The first prototype of the Vengeance-class destroyers began to take form. The sight of the colossal ship emerging from the shadows of an asteroid was both a triumph and a challenge. These ships were designed to slip through the gaps in the Zikar's defenses. Their weapons systems, once mere theoretical designs, were taking shape: laser cannons, using reversed particle beams, missiles equipped with gravity-based warheads, capable of disrupting Zikar shields, and quantum propulsion systems that would allow humanity to strike with unprecedented speed and agility. Voss stood atop a platform overlooking the construction bay, his gaze fixed on the massive hull being welded together. The air smelled of welding fuel, sharp and burning, mixing with the faint tang of ozone from the ship's electrical systems. His mind was far from the sight before him. He was already calculating their next steps, planning their attack. But even he couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt. Humanity was building something the Zikar had never anticipated. The first strike would be theirs. Behind him, Dvorak approached, tapping a tablet screen with his fingers. "The quantum displacement test is ready, Admiral." Voss turned to face him, his jaw tightening. He knew that this moment could make or break everything. The stakes had never been higher. Do it. Deep in the heart of the facility, Valk and his team worked feverishly. The quantum displacement system had been tested in simulations, but simulations were nothing compared to the real thing. The machine hummed with power, vibrations echoing through the chamber. The core was alive with energy, a faint pulse of blue light emanating from within the chamber. Voss watched through the reinforced glass as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. There was a flash of blinding light, followed by a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a low rumble spread through the floor, followed by a flicker on the display. The prototype ship, which had been stationed a few hundred kilometers away, vanished, and then reappeared in a different part of the bay. The room erupted into cheers, but Voss remained still. His mind raced, calculating. It had worked, but the Zikar wouldn't just let them slip through the cracks without retaliation. They had time, but not much. He turned to Dvorak. "We have one shot at this. Make it count." Dvorak nodded sharply. "We'll be ready, Admiral." In the darkness of the asteroid belt, the construction continued. The fleet was taking shape, built from the remnants of Zikar technology but infused with humanity's ingenuity. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear that crept into the edges of their minds, but every test, every success pushed those thoughts aside. The Zikar would come, and when they did, they would find something waiting for them. A fleet born from their own arrogance, ready to bring them to their knees. Voss stood alone in the observation deck. The future was uncertain, but the next chapter was already unfolding. The human fleet sat in the shadows, a coiled serpent, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Behind the gleaming walls of Earth's command center, the energy was palpable, sharp and relentless. The weeks of preparation had culminated in this quiet before the storm, a tense, calculated silence that threatened to shatter at any moment. Every crew member had been isolated in the hidden bases, chained to their duties, bound to their training, driven by a single goal: to destroy the Zikar. But even as the fleet grew stronger, Voss knew that the real challenge lay in waiting. The Zikar believed they had broken humanity. It was time to make them realize how wrong they were. "Everything is in place, Admiral," General Enric Kiros said, his voice steady despite the weight of their plan. He stood by the large heads-up display, his fingers tapping the map of the Zikar territories. "The fleet's ready, and we've got the final training drills running as we speak." Voss didn't respond immediately. His gaze was fixed on the display, on the flickering images of the Zakar forces pulling back, retreating from the edge of Earth's solar system. The Dominion was withdrawing. They believed humanity was broken. Earth had complied with every order, made the necessary cuts to its military presence, and broadcasted peaceful messages. The Zakar thought victory was certain, but they were wrong. Do you think they're buying it? Voss's voice was low, like the hum of distant thunder, an ominous prelude to something far greater. His eyes scanned the display again. They think we've surrendered, don't they? Kiros met Voss's gaze, his expression unwavering. They think we're weak, unsure. They think we'll bend to their will, just like everyone else has. They're wrong, Voss muttered under his breath. This is the game they'll regret. Across the room, Lieutenant Thane Rurik moved swiftly between terminals, checking data, feeding back into the system. He was one of the best pilots humanity had, and his mind worked as quickly as his hands. He paused by the comm panel, glancing at the Admiral. "We're ready to engage," Rurik said, his voice clear and sharp. "Every crew member has completed their drills. The quantum drives are aligned. They'll be the first to feel the full force of what we've built." Voss nodded, his eyes still lingering on the display, where the Zakar fleet was retreating. He didn't trust the silence. It was too easy, too calm. But the plan had been set in motion, and they were so close. "We'll hit them fast," Voss said, pushing his mind back into the present, focusing on the task at hand. "We make them think they're safe. Then we strike." His eyes narrowed. "Once the first jump is made, there's no turning back." As the final training exercises took place, the tension was building, yet it remained quiet. Even the hum of the systems was subdued, as though the fleet itself was waiting for the moment to launch. The human fleet operated in strict secrecy, its ships built far from the prying eyes of the Dominion, its crews trained in isolation. Days of drilling, constant simulations, and never-ending preparations were slowly taking their toll. The crew was living in a pressure cooker of uncertainty, but there was one thing that held them all together, the shared conviction that they would not be the ones to fall. Not again. Not after everything they had lost. "Admiral," Commander Helix Dvorak's voice came through the comms, breaking the momentary silence. His tone was low, but firm. "The last of the Zakar scouts are pulling out. They're retreating further. This could be our moment." Voss stood still, his gaze fixed on the tactical map, watching as the Zakar fleet disappeared further into the distance. He felt it in his gut, the tension of waiting, the weight of the choices ahead. His hand rested on the console, fingertips lightly grazing the surface. "We can't make any mistakes," he said, his words steady. "One wrong move, and they'll know. We won't get another chance." "The quantum drives are in position," Dvorak replied, his voice a calm contrast to the growing anxiety around him. "Once we engage, we can appear right on top of them, before they even know what hit them." Voss's eyes flickered over to Kiros, who was already adjusting the parameters on the heads-up display. "Is everything ready?" Voss asked, his gaze sharp, unwavering. Kiros nodded. "Yes, sir. The fleet's trajectory is locked, and all weapons are primed. We've synchronized the jump patterns. They'll never see us coming." For a moment Voss allowed himself to feel the gravity of the situation. They had been planning for years, operating in secrecy, building this fleet from the ashes of their defeated colonies. But it was now in this moment, when it all had to come together. The stakes were higher than ever. "Do we know where their fleet is headed?" Voss asked, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Lisar," Kiros answered, his finger tapping against the display. "They're hitting it next. The Zakar don't expect any resistance. They're in the process of finishing their conquest. If we strike now, we have a window of opportunity." Voss looked at the map, scanning the Zakar territories, focusing on Lisar. The world had been a thriving colony, a testament to humanity's expansion. Now it was on the brink of becoming just another casualty. "No," Voss said, a growl of determination in his voice. "We won't let that happen. Lisar will be the first target, but we'll hit them harder than they ever expected. Make them regret every single decision they made." Kiros turned his gaze to the other officers. "You heard the Admiral. Prepare to jump." The crew quickly fell into their roles, the atmosphere thick with the electric hum of readiness. The tension was starting to build in a way that couldn't be ignored. Every officer, every soldier on board, knew what they were facing, but they also knew what was at stake. "General, we're about to do this," Rorek said, his voice low and steady as he approached Voss. The two men locked eyes, a shared understanding passing between them. It was no longer just about strategy, it was personal. "We'll hit them hard," Voss said, the words heavy with finality. "Then we disappear into the void, before they even know what happened." The crew moved with purpose, their faces set, their hands steady. As the final moments ticked away, a quiet determination settled over the fleet. There was no more room for fear, no space for doubt. The plan was set. It was time. And then in one swift motion, the fleet moved. Jumping through the quantum rift, they disappeared from sight, appearing moments later in the heart of Zakar space. In the distance, Lisar glowed softly against the black void. But humanity had already begun its strike. The Dominion would never know what hit them. The first moment of the battle was unmarked by explosions or the roar of fire, but by a suffocating silence that pressed into the souls of those who waited. The human fleet had already made the quantum jump, emerging from the thin shadows of space, like a predator, a mere whisper against the deep black void. Their first target was not the civilians of Solarian, but the heart of the Zakar military, where they believed humanity to be nothing but an afterthought. The battle began with a suddenness that felt almost unnatural. 1 second, the Zakar forces, sprawled across Solarian's orbit, were complacent, believing their victory assured, and the next, the retribution arrived. The first Zakar ship crumpled like paper, a single, unexpected strike from a human destroyer. It was swift, surgical, a blow that would set the tone for the battle. The Zakar had not seen it coming. No warning, no signs. It was like a shadow piercing the very core of their defenses. It shattered apart in a burst of sharp, bright light, a massive fireball that illuminated the space around it. "Coordinates locked," Lieutenant Thane Rurek's voice echoed over the intercom, cutting through the chaos. "Second waves locked on target. Let's make them remember who they've angered." The sound of Rurek's words was harsh, laced with a determination honed from years of pain and training. His hands were steady as they guided his fighter into the heart of the oncoming storm. The pilots moved with a cold, instinctive sharpness, calculating every moment, never allowing themselves to falter. They had one shot at this, and Rurek intended to make it count. The Zakar were caught off guard, their communication systems faltered, under the quantum displacement interference, and their fleet scattered like disoriented prey. What they thought was an easy victory quickly turned into chaos. Ships fired into empty space, their missiles veering off target as if guided by invisible forces. Voss stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the destruction unfold on the laser plasma displays. His fingers were still, no wasted motion, his eyes flickered over the destruction, cold and calculating. "They were so sure of themselves," he muttered, his voice more a rasp than anything. "This is just the beginning. Keep pushing." One by one, the human ships decimated the Zakar's formations. The battle was brutal and fast, each human strike more precise than the last, each ship more deadly. The Vengeance-class destroyers, equipped with newly designed gravimetric weaponry, tore apart the Zakar's supposed invulnerable shields, rendering them useless. Their ships, which once seemed like monuments of technological superiority, now withered under the strength of humanity's new arsenal. Zakar High Commander Exculthar stood in the center of his command room, his features darkening as he watched his fleet crumble. He could not understand it. His eyes widened with disbelief as one of his top ships was consumed in an explosion. Their technology was meant to be invincible. It was supposed to end humanity's defiance. But now they were the ones in retreat. "This impossible," Zakar muttered to himself, his voice trembling with growing panic. How are they doing this?" Back on the bridge of the flagship, Voss remained unmoved. His jaw clenched as the report from his tactical officer flashed across the display. "We've wiped out 2/3 of their fleet, Admiral. They're retreating. They've activated emergency protocols." Voss's lip curled into a thin smile. "Let them run. They won't escape." As the enemy scrambled to organize a defense, Voss sent a message to the Zakar commander. His voice was calm but sharp, like the crack of a whip. "Zakar, you thought we would fall in silence. You were wrong. You've made a fatal mistake." The Zakar were reeling from the blow. They were still trying to communicate across their scattered forces, still trying to regain control, but it was already too late. Human ships had already planted their flag in the heart of Zikr territory, disabling key military installations with brutal efficiency. The Dominion had underestimated humanity's strategic brilliance and the depth of its resolve. "We have their central command in sight," Dvorak reported, his voice cutting through the tension. His eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. "They'll never recover from this. We've crippled their operations." But Voss's eyes were hard, focused on the next stage of the operation. He wasn't ready to stop yet. Not yet. Target their most vulnerable military outposts. Leave them scrambling. And so, with ruthless precision, humanity's fleet moved once more, attacking Zikar shipyards, power plants, weapons depots. Each strike was calculated, devastating, and most importantly, quick. They appeared, struck, and vanished again before the Zikar could respond. Lieutenant Rurik's squadron led the charge. Fighters darted through the Zikar's defensive positions, their engines screaming as they launched devastating bursts of fire. The air around them crackled with the sounds of combat, blinding flashes, and violent explosions tearing apart enemy vessels. "They don't know how to fight like this," Rurik said, his voice almost clinical in its calmness. "We're ghosts to them." The human fleet's quantum displacement technology gave them an unprecedented advantage. By the time the Zikar realized they were under attack, the human ships had already vanished into thin air, reappearing at a different angle, striking their targets with deadly accuracy. The Zikar had always relied on overwhelming force and sheer size, but they had no countermeasure for an enemy that could strike from anywhere and vanish before they could retaliate. As the hours dragged on, the battle shifted. The Zikar tried to rally, regrouping what little remained of their forces, but the gap in strength was widening. They had underestimated humanity in every way. Admiral Voss stood at the center of the control room, his gaze unwavering. "This is how we fight. This is what we owe to those we lost." Commander Dvorak approached him, his eyes narrowing. "We've shown them our strength. Do you think they'll retaliate?" Voss didn't blink. "Let them come. We're ready." The first phase of the plan had been executed flawlessly. Humanity's vengeance had been swift and merciless, and the Zikar had been broken. But as the first battle came to a close, Voss knew this was only the beginning. The war would rage on, but humanity had made one thing clear: they would not be pushed into submission, not again. The Zikar would learn what it meant to face an enemy who never forgot, never forgave. The fleet was ready, the retaliation complete, and now the reckoning would begin. The last remnants of the Zikar fleet had scattered into the outer reaches of Claron 9's system, desperate, disorganized, and broken. They thought their homeworld would be their sanctuary, their final bastion, but they were wrong. For humanity, this was the endgame, the final chapter in a war that had begun with the murder of billions and the near annihilation of their kind. Now Earth had come to claim what was theirs. "Set coordinates for Claron 9, Admiral Voss commanded, his voice a hard, unyielding thread that cut through the silence of the command room. His gaze never left the heads-up display, his mind calculating every move with a precision born of years of brutal experience. "They've run, but they won't escape." His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of his chair, his pulse steady, though every nerve in his body vibrated with a hunger for retribution. Humanity had faced extinction, and now it was their turn to act. As the fleet hurtled toward the heart of the Zikar Empire, Voss's mind flashed back to the days before this war began, to the families lost on the colonies of Solarian, Lysar, and Verida, to the people who had believed they were safe, only to see their worlds consumed in an instant. It was all so clear now. He had to finish this, for them, and for everyone who would ever live on Earth. "Sir, we're entering Claron 9's orbit." Lieutenant Thane Rurik's voice broke through his thoughts, but there was no hesitation, no fear in it. The pilots had become as cold as the steel of their ships, unshakable in their resolve. Voss nodded, his face hardening. "Let's end it." The fleet appeared without warning, dropping out of quantum displacement right above the heart of the Zikar's capital system. Claron 9 was a bruised jewel, with its towering cities and vast military installations spread out like an unrepentant scar on the face of the galaxy. The final confrontation was inevitable. The Zikar had never seen anything like it, a single, unified force capable of obliterating their invincible fleets in mere hours. The Zikar scrambled to regroup, but it was already too late. Their defensive systems flickered to life, but the moment the first human destroyer fired, their power grid collapsed under the force of the attack. A warship exploded, twisting in space like a dying animal, its core igniting in a burst of light that ripped through the void. Rurik's squadron led the charge, darting between the Zikar's shattered defenses. Their ships, now faster than any Zikar vessel, tore through the darkness. Fighter after fighter disintegrated in the wake of their guns, the flames of battle cutting across the black. Rurik's voice came through the comms, calm, but unwavering. Enemy forces are disintegrating. They're too slow to keep up with us. The Zikar had no answer to the fury of the human onslaught. Their warships fell, one after another, torn apart by weapons that should have been beyond humanity's reach. Voss stood, hands clenched into fists, watching as each Zikar ship that had once dominated the galaxy succumbed to the same fate that had awaited his people. On the surface of Claron 9, the final defense lines were crumbling. The Zikar tried to rally, but it was a futile attempt. The once proud empire was being swept away like sand in the wind. There was no place left to hide. Every step they took toward reclaiming their pride was a step deeper into the abyss. Admiral Voss, Commander Helix Dvorak, spoke up, his voice as cold as the space outside. The Zikar have activated their last line of defense. Ixcal Thar is holding out in the capital. If we don't strike soon, they'll reinforce. Voss looked at the images on the laser plasma display. High Commander Ixcal Thar, the Zikar leader who had ordered the massacre of billions, was still holding on to a false hope. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and it would be swift. They won't escape, Voss said simply. His eyes locked onto the map, and the command went out, immediate and unyielding. Activate the final assault. Wipe them out. As the final battle unfolded, the human fleet tightened its grip around Claron 9. Ships that had once been mere children of an expansive, fading empire now faced the wrath of humanity, its fleet a weapon of divine retribution, perfected over years of toil, sacrifice, and unimaginable loss. When Voss finally set foot on Claron 9's broken surface, the remnants of the Zikar military were already retreating into the depths of their underground fortresses. The planet was burning, its towering buildings reduced to rubble, but there was something unmistakably final in the air. The Zikar were broken. At the Zikar stronghold, Voss faced High Commander Ixcal Thar. The Zikar's once confident stance had given way to desperation. His golden scales, once gleaming with pride, now appeared dull, worn. He stared at Voss with a look of disbelief, his shoulders hunched beneath the weight of his failure. Mercy. Var's voice trembled, the words hanging like a heavy mist between them. Please, we surrender. We never thought you would retaliate like this. Voss's eyes were unwavering, his words cold as steel. You thought we would break. You were wrong. He took a step forward, his gaze hardening. You will pay for what you've done, but you won't be destroyed. We do not seek annihilation. Var looked up at him, the realization of his fall sinking in. What will you do to us? Voss's voice was firm, but there was a strange weight to it, one that spoke of both vengeance and restraint. You will rebuild, under our supervision. This will be your punishment. We are not conquerors, Ixcal Thar, but you will remember what happens when you underestimate humanity. With the surrender of the Zikar came the dawn of a new era. Admiral Voss sent a final message to the galaxy, broadcast across the stars for all to hear. We do not forget, we do not forgive, but we do not seek annihilation. We are not conquerors, we are humanity. The words spread across the galaxy, echoing in the minds of every species who had once thought they could control or destroy humanity. And as the message reached every corner of the universe, humanity stood tall, not just as victors, but as something more, a symbol of strength tempered with wisdom, a species that had faced extinction and survived, not through brute force alone, but through resolve, intelligence, and compassion. Voss stood on the rebuilt surface of Earth, looking out over the horizon, where the stars once seemed so far away, but now they felt within reach. The war had ended, but the true journey of humanity was just beginning. They had faced their greatest trial, and now they were poised to lead a new intergalactic order, one based not on fear, but on respect. And in the quiet of that moment, as Voss gazed into the infinity before him, he knew that humanity would not simply survive the stars, it would shape them. The message had been sent, loud and clear. The galaxy had learned what it meant to face humanity's wrath and humanity's mercy.